Tonight, where are we all to live? There are more and more of us, and the pace of building is nothing like keeping up. Do we need to rethink our urge to preserve the countryside? The government minister who makes the rules tells us it's time to rethink a lot of ideas.
I think the reason why people object to us building on open farm and open land is because we build ugly rubbish.
He wants to cover a lot more of the green and pleasant land in bricks and mortar. We need, he claims, to learn to love the built environment as much as we treasure the natural. He's here along with a designer, a builder, and someone who doesn't much care for a lot of what's on offer. Also tonight, as the newspapers wait to hear what Lord Justice Levinson thinks should happen to them, we revisit the evidence and feel the ghosts of the news of the world.
The presses have left the Murdoch's fortress whopping, but what happened inside this building is still making news.
And what's it like to have your child murdered and then to have the media pack turn up on your doorstep demanding you talk to them?
I've not only lost my daughter, Phil and James's sister, the trauma of all of that, and it just felt like a pack of wolves outside.
A former tabloid editor and the head of Hacked Off discuss whether a new regulatory system would give her any redress. Well, we all need one, and too few of us have one. There are reckoned to be the best part of 2 million people on the waiting list for some form of social housing, while employers complain they can't fill jobs in some parts of the country because there's nowhere for people to live. We're currently throwing up 100,000 or so houses a year, which is perhaps a third of the number we need to build. But this is a small and crowded country, and getting more so. Where are we all to live? Tonight we start a two-part inquiry. In the first of two films, Allegra Stratton has been spending time with the Planning Minister, Nick Bowles.
Dawn in one of England's pleasant pastures. It's beautiful, but couldn't some gently puffing chimneys of some houses also stop the heart?
All towns and villages, before they were built on land like this. But we shouldn't obsess with the idea that the only landscapes that are beautiful are open landscapes. Sometimes buildings are better.
Houses cheap by jowl, but very few new additions in recent years. Newsnight is on the road with the Minister for Planning. First stop, historic Stamford in Lincolnshire. Why, in the year 2012, are we building at as slow a rate as during the last World War? Only 115,000 houses were built last year, and the average age of buying your first home is, according to the government, 33.
Here we are in the meadows in Stamford, and this was exactly like that field. And then they built Stamford, one of the most beautiful towns in England. When it was built, it wasn't just rich people living here. You know, there's all kinds of housing here for all levels. And it was not, you know, some grand prince's design for a new town. It was local tradespeople who decided they wanted to build nice places to live. And that's what we've somehow forgotten how to do. And I think the reason why people object to us building on open farm and open land is because we build ugly rubbish.
You're saying we build prettier houses by Greenbelt because you lot won't mind?
No, not at all, because the Greenbelt is vitally important. It has a vitally important role to prevent cities from sprawling endlessly, as they've done in many other countries in the world. So, no, we're saying very clearly that we're going to protect the Greenbelt, we're going to keep the Greenbelt, but people, if they want to have housing for their kids, if they want to have people able to bring up their kids in a small house with a garden, they've got to accept that we've got to build more on some open land.
We're testing Nick Bowles' idea in his own backyard. A constituent of the minister is about to get development out the back of his backyard. The houses in this area have lost their fight against a new residential development due to begin at the bottom of their gardens. We bring their MP to test his idea with them.
My main concern is that the amount of industrial sites in Stamford that have been lost to housing, where are the people going to work?
There is a massive problem with the housing. We have built far too few houses, and that's why, you know, your kids, the chances of them being able to buy a house with a garden when they're in their late 20s or early 30s and having young kids is becoming ever smaller.
What's wrong with that?
Everything's relative, isn't it? I mean, wages are going up, houses are not going up at the moment, so it will sort itself out.
From a backyard to an armchair, a professor of architecture at Cambridge. He lives in Stamford, of course.
I have in the past had dealings with mass house builders. I find that they're actually impossible to negotiate with. I think for them the arithmetic determines absolutely everything.
Why is it that they don't want to innovate with design? Is it that people like that stuff? Are we just being really snobby here?
Well, it obviously sells, and innovation is risk. The construction is completely risk-averse.
We've come from the utopia to Purfleet in Essex, and what Bowles thinks is the problem.
Well, I just want you to imagine, Allegra, that you live here in Rose Cottage, okay, and you've got this amazing long view across the Thames towards Canary Wharf, and then they come and propose to build this pig-ugly slab, this sort of wall along the river that completely doesn't fit with the area, that doesn't connect with the local houses. No wonder you oppose it.
It seems like you are right, because the Design Council gives this a -1, but it does say that that was an aggregates yard, so that wouldn't have been an oil painting before.
If they'd created separate blocks with views through and easy access to the river with lots of green planting, then I think people on this side of the road would have been much less likely to be upset by it.
That would have been what they could afford or decided they wanted to afford, right?
To some extent, because of course land is very expensive, but also one has to say that they're just lazy.
Last year, the Royal Institute of British Architects found that in one sample, the average new home in England is 92% or 4 square metres short of the recommended minimum. Lots of people say that its design is not brilliant.
Yeah.
You can't reach the river, can you?
I cannot reach the river, no. There is a gate over there, but it's actually got a padlock on it.
But some of the experts say the problem with this development is the density.
Let's be honest with you, I like it that way, you know what I mean? The more people that move in, then we get like we get bigger shops, like more pubs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? More life sort of thing.
So what's it like, the building? Is it put together well?
Oh, solid, mate, yeah. Nice and warm. Yeah, there's no drafts, no nothing. It's lovely.
Good.
It's nice. And a fair size as well.
You don't feel, oh, these are too much like lots of other housing developments I see up and down the country?
A brick building is just a brick building, isn't it? You know what I mean? You can plonk it and put it in Letchworth or wherever, and it's exactly the same, but it's the area as well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the people. In a perfect world, I mean, I would like to live in a cottage or bungalow, and it'd be lovely. But I say it's not a perfect world.
And so to our last stop and the government's answer, garden cities like Letchworth. If a vacant patch of land can be found, then, the argument goes, it might be cheaper to develop more houses. And Nick Bowles has brought us all here, because this is the paradigm, and yet you've been here literally before.
I've been here twice with 2 previous administrations, because this place is always held up as the one that we all could learn from.
Does that frustrate you, Nick?
Yeah, it does frustrate me in a sense if everybody's been trying to grasp after the same ideal but failing to find a modern version of it.
They built houses in a landscape. Someone has to own the bits that are not privately owned by individuals, the public realm. The moment that that is in a organisational structure that doesn't necessarily think it's a good thing to invest in, all they try to do is raise it back to nothing. You just end up with concrete and concrete.
Could government do something about that?
They could insist that there's a proper management plan for the public realm and a sort of minimum infrastructure level of what people see outside beyond the plots. so that you get these kind of streets. Most local authorities kick back against the developers when they propose street trees and tell them that they don't want higher quality materials. They say that we couldn't repair them and mend them if anything goes wrong. So just stick with the few basic off-the-shelf solutions, and then we'll adopt those parts. If you use anything special, we won't adopt them, and you'll have to pay for them yourself.
Nick has given us a proposition that if you can improve the design of modern house building, you might get less opposition.
That's a theory. Britain is dominated by people aged about 63, a couple of years from retirement, who are terrified of losing some value in what they see as their principal asset, their home, and what might happen to that. These people are time rich, they can write letters, they can certainly drive the council away from a planning application.
I think that we have to persuade people, and it's my job and the job of people senior to me to make the arguments to 63-year-olds who've got time on their hands to write letters of objection. There is a sort of basic moral right, just like there's a right to an education and a right to healthcare, there's a right to have a home with a little bit of ground around it to bring your family up in.
Well, the Planning Minister, Nick Bowles, is here now, along with Peter Redfern, Chief Executive of the house building company, Taylor Wimpey, Maria Bennett, Chair of the Formby Residents Action Group in Merseyside, and Wayne Hemingway, Designer and Trustee of the Design Council. Where does this so-called moral right to a garden come from?
Well, I think, you sound rather amazed by it, but I think we think it's completely straightforward that people have a right to have good, decent health care for their family, and that they have a right for a decent education for their kids. And I think that basically the job of government is to meet the aspirations of hard-working people. And if you are working hard and you're on an average...
Aspiration is not the same as a moral right.
But if you're on an average wage and you're working hard, I think there is a moral right. You might disagree, but it's my view. There is a moral right to expect that you will be able to afford to buy a little house with a bit of garden to bring your kids up.
So people in Tower
weird?
Hamlets or Mayfair even, who don't have a garden, are somehow being denied a moral right,
No, not at all. If you choose and can afford to live in Mayfair, then you probably won't be able to afford. Similarly, some people will choose, some people prefer to live in the city, but all opinion research suggests that most British people, like the gentleman in the film, said, in the ideal world, I'd have a cottage. But we don't live in an ideal world. Well, my view is that the world could be more ideal than we've allowed it to become, because we haven't built enough houses and we've allowed land prices to become so stratospheric we can't afford to give people any space.
And how much more of Britain would have to be built over for that ambition to be achieved?
Well, under 10% of Britain currently, under 10% of England,